I took my daughter-in-law's damaged cell phone in for repair, but the technician who fixed it called me aside and whispered, "Cancel your credit cards, change your passwords, and run immediately." When I asked him what was going on, he turned the phone towards me, and what he showed me froze my blood. But before I continue, make sure you've already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. My name is Mary. I'm 65 years old, and until 3 days ago, I thought I had a perfectly normal life. I live in a comfortable house in Denver, Colorado, with my husband, Robert, who is 67. We've been retired recently. I was a history teacher, and he was an engineer. We have one son, Andrew, who married Sophia 5 years ago. Our daughter-in-law always struck me as a lovely young woman. She had a degree in administration, was smart, good-looking, and worked at a financial consulting firm. Andrew met her at a party with mutual friends, and they got married in less than a year. Sometimes I thought she was a little distant, but I put it down to work stress and her more reserved personality. It all started last Wednesday when Sophia came to visit us alone. That was unusual, as she and Andrew normally came together on weekends. She arrived frazzled, saying she had a problem with her phone. The screen was completely shattered, and she asked if I knew of a reliable place to get it fixed. I broke the phone by accident, and I need it working today for an important meeting tomorrow. Andrew is out of town, and I have no idea where to take it, she explained. Coincidentally, I had taken my phone for repair last week at a small shop downtown. The owner, Jesse, whom everyone called Jess, was the son of a former colleague from the school where I taught. I offered to take her device to him. "That would be perfect, Mary. You'd be a lifesaver," Sophia said, handing me the phone. "The passcode is 2818, our wedding anniversary. I have to rush to the office now. Can I pick it up tonight?" I agreed, of course. I took the phone and drove to Jess's shop. The place was small, wedged between a pharmacy and a bakery, with an unassuming sign, "Express Repairs." When I walked in, Jess was hunched over a table full of tiny tools and disassembled electronic devices. "Miss Mary, it's good to see you again," he greeted me with a smile. I explained about my daughter-in-law's phone, and he assured me he could fix it in a few hours. "I'll come back after lunch," I said, handing him the device and the passcode. I spent the afternoon running errands, and around 4 o'clock, I returned to the shop. Jess was alone, and when he saw me enter, his face changed. The friendly expression gave way to something I couldn't quite place at the moment. Worry, fear. "Miss Mary," he said softly, glancing quickly toward the door, as if checking that no one else was there. "The phone is ready, but I need to show you something, Ma'am." I frowned, confused. "Is there a problem with the device?" "Not with the device," he replied, and then he leaned closer, speaking almost in a whisper. "Cancel your credit cards, change your passwords, and run immediately." A shiver ran down my spine. "What? What are you talking about, Jess?" He motioned for me to come closer, opened Sophia's phone, and went into the messaging app. He navigated to a folder called Plan B and showed me the screen. My blood ran cold. They were messages exchanged between Sophia and my son, detailing a plan to kill me. "Mom is getting more forgetful," read a message from Andrew. "It's the perfect time. The doctor is already documenting her memory lapses at my request. No one will question it when it happens." Sophia's reply made my stomach turn. "Her and your father's life insurance is worth almost $2 million. With the sale of the house afterward, we'll have enough to start over, far from Denver." I felt my legs weaken and had to lean on the counter. This can't be true," I mumbled, more to myself than to Jess. "Miss Mary, I swear I didn't want to get involved. When I was testing the phone after the repair, a notification popped up, and I accidentally saw these messages. I couldn't ignore it. I kept scrolling through the conversation, my eyes wide with horror. They discussed methods, dates, how to make it look like a household accident. They talked about medications they could use, dosages that would be fatal for a woman my age with high blood pressure. My own son and his wife, coldly planning my death. "They're planning to kill Robert too," I whispered, feeling short of breath. The conversation detailed how they would eliminate my husband afterward. "It has to be a few weeks apart," Andrew wrote. "An elderly couple dying at the same time would raise suspicion." Jess closed the shop door and flipped the sign to closed. He brought me a glass of water and helped me sit down. "You have to go to the police," he said, his voice firm but gentle. I shook my head, still in shock. "They won't believe me. It's the word of a forgetful old woman against my son and daughter-in-law, respectable people in the community. Then, Mom, you have to gather evidence and you have to protect yourself." He was right. I took the phone with trembling hands and started taking pictures of the messages with my own device. I documented everything. Dates, times, the detailed plan, the mentions of the family doctor who was apparently being manipulated to create a history of dementia. "Jess, could you restore the phone exactly as it was? I don't want them to know we found out anything." He agreed, and we worked together for another hour. When he finished, Sophia's phone looked untouched, with no sign that its secret messages had been discovered. Leaving the shop, I felt like I was in a nightmare. The grey sky over Denver seemed even gloomier. How could I go back home? How could I look at Robert, knowing our only son was planning to kill us? Worse yet, how would I face Sophia when she came to pick up the phone? Driving back home, I planned every step. First, I had to alert Robert without frightening him too much. Then, we had to act fast, but smartly. If Andrew and Sophia suspected we knew something, they could accelerate their plans or create a new strategy. The weight of the betrayal was almost unbearable. My son, whom I carried in my womb, whom I nursed, whom I helped with homework, whom I comforted when he broke up with his first girlfriend, was planning my death for money. I parked the car in front of our house and took several deep breaths. I had to stay calm. The life or death game had begun, and I had to be smarter than the two young people who thought a forgetful old lady would be easy prey. Little did they know that this lady had faced a military dictatorship when she was a student, had raised a child alone while her husband travelled for work, and had survived breast cancer 5 years ago. If they thought I would go down without a fight, they were dead wrong. I got out of the car, holding Sophia's phone as if it were a bomb about to explode. I walked into the house, where my life would never be the same again. Robert was in the living room, watching the news as he did every afternoon, his familiar face, with his grey hair and reading glasses on the tip of his nose, gave me an instant of normalcy amidst the chaos that had invaded my life. "Were you able to sort out Sophia's phone?" he asked absently, without taking his eyes off the television. I swallowed. "Yes, it's fixed." I had to tell him, but I didn't know how to start. How do you tell your husband of 40 years that your only son wants both of you dead? "Robert," I called, my voice firmer than I expected. "I need to show you something. It's serious." Something in my tone must have alarmed him, because he immediately turned off the television and looked at me intently. "What's wrong, Mary?" I sat next to him and showed him the photos I had taken of the messages. I watched his face as he read. The initial confusion, followed by disbelief, then horror, and finally a pain so profound that I thought he might collapse right there. "No," he whispered, his voice choked. "There must be some mistake. Andrew would never..." I didn't want to believe it either, I replied, holding his trembling hands. But it's them, Robert. It's Andrew's number. It's the way he writes. And Sophia replying from her phone, which is here with me. Robert closed his eyes, taking several deep breaths. When he opened them again, I saw something I rarely witnessed: absolute determination. What are we going to do? He asked. I explained my initial plan: document everything, verify our bank accounts, change passwords, cancel shared cards, investigate which doctor might be involved in this. We had to act as if nothing had changed, while secretly gathering enough evidence to confront them, or if necessary, take it all to the police. Sophia is coming to pick up the phone tonight, I warned. We have to act normal. How? Robert's voice cracked. How am I supposed to look at her knowing that? The same way I've taught teenagers to fake interest in medieval history for 30 years, I tried to joke, but the smile was weak. One step at a time, Robert. Our lives depend on this. We spent the next hour reviewing online bank accounts. We discovered something disturbing. Small sums had been transferred regularly from our joint account to an unknown account over the last 3 months. Amounts low enough not to raise suspicion. $200 here, $300 there, but adding up to nearly $10,000. Andrew has access to our accounts, Robert murmured. We gave him power of attorney last year, remember? Just in case something happened to us. The irony was bitter. We trusted him so much that we practically handed him the tools for our own destruction. We changed all passwords, cancelled 2 credit cards that Andrew had as authorized users, and called the bank requesting a block on any transaction exceeding $1,000 without in-person authorization. What about the doctor? Robert asked. Dr. Paul had been our doctor for over 15 years. He was a friend. He occasionally had lunch at our house. The thought that he might be falsifying medical reports at my son's request was almost as painful as Andrew's betrayal. I'll schedule an appointment tomorrow, I decided. Alone. I want to see what he says about my memory. At 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Robert and I looked at each other, tense. He squeezed my hand, a silent promise that we would stick to our plan. I forced a smile and opened the door. Sophia looked as beautiful as ever, with her impeccably styled brown hair and elegant clothes. That polished appearance now seemed like a perfect mask to hide the monstrosity beneath. Mary, sorry to come so late. How did it go with the technician? Everything's fine, I replied, handing her the phone. Jess did a great job. The screen is like new. She turned the device on, quickly checked it, and smiled. Perfect. How much was it? Let me pay. Don't worry, I already took care of it. It was on the house as a courtesy. He didn't even charge because I'm an old customer. Sophia hesitated for a moment, a slight furrowing of her brow that I wouldn't have noticed before. Was she worried the technician had seen something? Are you sure? I don't want to inconvenience you. Of course not, dear. Do you want to come in? Robert is watching TV. We were about to have some iced tea. Oh, I can't today. I have a presentation early tomorrow and still need to review some data. I noticed how she avoided looking directly at me while speaking. A skillful liar. But now that I knew what to look for, the small tells were there. I understand. When is Andrew coming back from his trip? Tomorrow night, she quickly replied. Another lie. From the messages, Andrew wasn't on a trip. He was at home, waiting for news from her. Tell him to visit us soon, I said, keeping my tone casual. We haven't seen him in almost 2 weeks. Sure, she smiled, putting the phone in her purse. He misses you too. Oh, I just remembered. Did you check out that Dr. Andrew recommended, the memory specialist? My heart pounded, but I kept my expression neutral. We haven't had time yet. Why? It's just. She hesitated, her face a mask of feigned concern. Andrew mentioned you've been forgetting some important things lately. Names, appointments. His impression, I replied with a light laugh. My memory is excellent. I even remember the day you wore that same outfit to my cousin Eliza's birthday party 2 months ago. I saw something flash quickly across her eyes. Frustration? Concern? Before her social smile returned. Well, anyway, it never hurts to get a checkup, does it? At your age? Of course, of course. I'll schedule an appointment soon. We said goodbye, and as soon as I closed the door, I leaned against it, exhausted by the effort of pretending to be normal. Robert was waiting for me in the living room, tense. Well? She tried to plant the idea of my memory loss, I replied, sitting next to him. They're setting the stage for when it happens. What do we do now? We act, I replied, a determination growing within me. First thing tomorrow, I'm going to see Dr. Paul. Then I want to check on our life insurance. We need to know exactly what Andrew messed with. And then we'll set our own trap. That night, I could barely sleep. Every noise in the house seemed like a threat. I got up 3 times to check if the doors were locked. On one of those times, I found Robert in the kitchen, drinking water, with the same tormented look I must have had. I was thinking about Andrew as a boy, he said softly. Remember how afraid he was of the dark? How he'd run to our bed during thunderstorms? What happened to that child, Mary? I had no answer. How had our loving son transformed into this calculated stranger, capable of coldly planning our deaths? We're going to find out, I promised, hugging him. And we are going to survive this. The next morning, I called Dr. Paul's office claiming an emergency. I managed to get an appointment for 10 o'clock. Before leaving, we checked all our online accounts again and discovered something even more disturbing. There was a new life insurance policy in my name, taken out 3 months ago, that I knew nothing about. How is that possible? I asked, horrified. Robert navigated through the digitized documents. Look at the signature. It's yours. I leaned closer to the screen, incredulous. The signature really did look like mine, but I had never signed that document. They forged my signature, I murmured. And there's more. Look at the amount, $1.5 million, and the sole beneficiary is… Andrew, Robert finished, his voice breaking. The reality of the situation finally hit me with full force. It wasn't just a vague plan. They had already taken concrete steps. Documents were forged, money was being diverted, a doctor was possibly involved, and now a life insurance policy I knew nothing about, ready to be collected after my accidental death. I left the house feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. The consultation with Dr. Paul would be crucial. I needed to find out the extent of his involvement in this conspiracy. The office was quiet that morning. The receptionist, who had known me for years, smiled when she saw me. Ms. Mary, good to see you. The doctor will see you shortly. Less than 10 minutes later, I was called in. Dr. Paul, a middle-aged man with greying hair and a generally friendly demeanor, seemed slightly uncomfortable when I entered. Mary, what a surprise. Andrew called me yesterday. He said you were reluctant to get tests done. I kept my expression neutral as I sat down. Really? That's strange for him to say. In fact, doctor, I came because I'm concerned about my memory. The doctor nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. Yes, Andrew mentioned some concerning episodes. Forgetfulness, confusion. Curious, I replied calmly, because I don't recall having any such problems. Dr. Paul hesitated for a moment. Well, Mary, sometimes the patient doesn't perceive their own lapses. It's common in early stages of dementia, and you already have a diagnosis, apparently. He seemed increasingly uncomfortable. No, of course not. But Andrew showed me some videos. You confusing dates, forgetting names of close people. Videos? I asked, genuinely surprised. Can I see them? He didn't leave copies, but… Dr. Paul, I interrupted, leaning forward. I've been your patient for 15 years. You know me. Do you really believe I have dementia? Or are you just believing what my son says? The silence that followed was revealing. Finally, he sighed. Mary, Andrew came to see me several times in the last few months. Very worried. He said you and Robert were losing the ability to care for yourselves, that you needed supervision. He asked me to document any signs of cognitive decline, and you agreed. He had the decency to look ashamed. I only wrote down what he reported. I didn't diagnose anything without tests. I stared at him, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Dr. Paul, my son is planning to kill me and Robert. The shock on his face seemed genuine. What? Mary, that's a very serious accusation. I have proof, and now I understand why he needed your involvement, even if indirect. A medical history documenting cognitive decline would make my death much less suspicious. Dr. Paul visibly paled. His hands, usually steady, trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. Mary, I would never participate in something like that. I thought Andrew was genuinely concerned about you. I pulled my phone out of my purse and showed him some of the photos I had taken of the messages. As he read, his face shifted from disbelief to horror. My God, he finally murmured. I had no idea. I want to see my medical record, I demanded. Now. He hesitated only a moment before accessing his computer and opening my medical history. He turned the screen so I could read. There it was, documented in impersonal clinical language. Patient presents signs of cognitive decline as reported by son. Recurrent episodes of confusion, temporal and spatial disorientation, forgetfulness of names and recent events. Full neurological evaluation recommended. This is a lie, I said firmly, and you know it. Mary, I only recorded what Andrew reported. I didn't confirm or diagnose anything. But you created a record that could be used against me. An official medical record suggesting I'm losing my mental faculties. Perfect for when I died accidentally, wouldn't you say? The doctor seemed truly disturbed. What do you want me to do? First, print this history for me with your signature. Then, I want you to make a new record, dated today, stating that you personally evaluated me and found no signs of cognitive impairment. He agreed immediately, clearly shaken by the situation. And, Doctor, I added as he typed, if anything happens to Robert or me, this history and our conversation today will be the first things the police see. I left the office with the documents in hand, concrete proof of the conspiracy against us. Dr. Paul had been manipulated by Andrew, but his complicity, even if through naivety, had almost cost us our lives. I drove to the bank next. I needed to personally verify our accounts and mainly revoke any power of attorney we had given Andrew. The manager, Morrison, who had handled our accounts for years, was visibly surprised when I asked to revoke the power of attorney. Ms. Mary, are you sure? Your son recently contacted me saying you would like to expand his powers to manage the finances, as Mr. Robert isn't doing well health-wise. Another lie. Robert was perfectly healthy for his 67 years. My husband is doing great, Mr. Morrison. And yes, I am absolutely sure. In fact, I want to review all movements in our accounts for the last 6 months. We spent the next hour reviewing statements. In addition to the small transfers we had already identified online, we discovered something even more disturbing. Andrew had initiated the process to get a second credit card for Robert, claiming the original was lost. He said Mr. Robert had lost the card, but didn't want to bother him with the bureaucracy, the manager explained, clearly embarrassed now. "And you issued a new card without the cardholder's presence or signature?" I asked, incredulous. "Well, yes." Mr. Morrison squirmed in his chair, uncomfortable. "Since he had power of attorney and already handled several financial matters for you," I took a deep breath, controlling my anger. "Cancel that card immediately and block any future attempt to issue one without our physical presence." When I left the bank, I felt simultaneously relieved at having thwarted another aspect of the plan and terrified by the extent of the plot. Andrew had meticulously prepared the ground, creating a scenario where our death would appear natural, and he would have total control over our assets. On the way home, my phone rang. It was him. My heart pounded, but I answered with the most normal voice possible. "Hello, son." "Mum, everything okay? I just got back from the trip, and Sophia told me you took her phone for repair. That was very kind of you." The naturalness with which he lied was stunning. There was no trip. "It was nothing, dear. The repair guy is a colleague's son. He gave us a good deal." "That's great. Hey, I was thinking of stopping by tonight with Sophia. It's been a while since we had dinner together, hasn't it?" A chill ran down my spine. Why the sudden interest in visiting us? Had they noticed something? Had the doctor called Andrew after my visit? "Of course," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Come over. Yes, I'll make that lasagna you like." "Perfect. Oh, and Mum, did you go to the doctor I recommended? Sophia said you hadn't gone yet." "I actually went to see Dr. Paul this morning." A brief silence. "You did? And what did he say?" "Nothing out of the ordinary. He ran a few simple tests. Said I'm perfectly fine for my age." Another silence, longer this time. "Oh, well, that's good then. But maybe it would be good to seek a second opinion, you know? Sometimes Paul is too conservative with diagnoses." "We'll see, son. See you tonight then." "Yes, around 7 o'clock. See you later." When I hung up, my hands were shaking. The seemingly innocent conversation was loaded with threatening subtext. Andrew clearly expected Dr. Paul to have declared me with some form of cognitive impairment and was destabilized when he learned that wasn't the case. And now he wanted to have dinner with us tonight. Why? To observe my behavior? To check if I showed any suspicion? Or something worse? I arrived home and found Robert in the living room surrounded by papers. He looked up, anxious. "How did it go? Is the doctor involved?" I explained everything. How Andrew had manipulated Dr. Paul to create a false medical history. How he gained access to our bank accounts. How he forged life insurance documents. "And he just called me," I concluded. "He and Sophia want to have dinner here tonight." Robert paled. "Do you think they suspect we found out something?" "I'm not sure. But he was clearly disturbed when he learned I went to Dr. Paul and that the doctor found nothing wrong with me." We looked at each other, the same silent question hanging between us. What might Andrew and Sophia attempt during that dinner? "We can't eat or drink anything they bring," Robert finally said, "and one of us must always be alert, watching what they do." I agreed. "We need to record that dinner somehow. If they say anything incriminating." Robert nodded and went to fetch his old digital recorder, which he used to record meetings when he still worked. We tested the device, checking if it still worked, and where we could hide it in the dining room. I spent the afternoon preparing the lasagna I promised, even though the idea of sitting down at the table with two people planning to kill us made me feel physically ill. Every time I thought about the messages, about the calculating coldness with which our own son discussed our death, I felt a pain that no word could describe. "How did we get to this point?" I asked Robert as we set the table for dinner. "Where did we go wrong with him?" Robert shook his head, his eyes showing the same pain I felt. "I don't know, Mary. I thought we knew our son." At 7 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Robert and I exchanged one last confirming glance. The recorder was hidden beneath the table, running. Our strategy was simple: act natural, observe their every move, and if possible, provoke a slip that we could document. I opened the door with a practiced smile. Andrew and Sophia were there, he holding a bottle of red wine and she a box of chocolates that they knew were my favourites. "Mom!" Andrew exclaimed, hugging me enthusiastically. The physical contact, which used to give me comfort, now gave me the shivers. How could he hug me, knowing he was planning to kill me? "Great to see you," he continued, handing me the bottle. "We brought a special wine for tonight." "Ah, thank you, dear," I replied, discreetly checking the label. It was an expensive vintage, one that would normally impress me. Now it only made me wonder if it was tampered with. Robert greeted them in the living room, his smile as forced as mine. I offered them water, coffee, or juice, anything but the wine they brought. "Not yet, Mum," Andrew said, settling comfortably on the sofa. "We'll save the wine to go with dinner." We talked about trivialities for almost half an hour: their work, the weather, local news. The surreal normalcy of the situation made me nauseous. I watched as Andrew occasionally exchanged glances with Sophia, how she was attentive to my every movement, how he steered seemingly innocent questions about my routine, my medications, my recent difficulties. "So, Mum," he finally said, leaning forward, "how exactly was the appointment with Dr. Paul today? Did he run tests? Did he order any specific scans?" I kept my expression neutral. It was a normal checkup. He didn't see anything concerning. "Strange," Andrew murmured, frowning. "He told me he suspected something more serious, maybe early Alzheimer's." "Really?" I asked, raising my eyebrows in feigned surprise. "When did he tell you that?" Andrew realized the slip. "Oh, last week, when I called him to talk about those episodes I noticed." "What episodes would those be, son? I don't remember having any problems." A condescending smile appeared on his face. "See? That's exactly what worries us. You don't remember. Last week you forgot the name of Ms. Elizabeth, our neighbour for 20 years. Then you left the stove on for hours." None of that had happened. They were lies manufactured to build the narrative of my supposed dementia. "Curious," I replied calmly. "I spoke to Ms. Elizabeth just yesterday, calling her by name, and I haven't used the stove in days. I've preferred the microwave lately." Andrew's smile wavered for an instant. "Shall we have dinner?" Robert intervened, standing up. "Mary's lasagna smells wonderful." At the table, the theatre continued. I served the lasagna while Robert discreetly swapped the wine glasses. We had agreed. We would pretend to drink the wine they brought, but in reality, we would drink from another bottle we had previously opened in the kitchen. "A toast," Andrew proposed, raising his glass, "to family and health." We raised our glasses and pretended to drink. I watched carefully as Andrew and Sophia took their own sips. They drank normally, without hesitation. Maybe the wine wasn't tampered with after all. "Mary," Sophia said, setting her glass down, "Andrew and I have been talking. We worry about you living alone in this big house." "It's true," Andrew added. especially considering these recent episodes. We thought perhaps it would be better if you moved to a smaller place, easier to maintain. Or maybe we could come and live here with you for a while. I felt Robert tense up beside me. This was it. They wanted to move into our house, to be closer to execute the plan. How thoughtful of you, I replied, keeping my voice steady. But we're perfectly fine, aren't we, Robert? Absolutely, he agreed. In fact, we're even thinking of traveling soon, maybe a season on the coast, in Florida. I saw Andrew and Sophia exchange a quick look. Traveling? Now? Andrew questioned. I don't think that's a good idea, Dad. What about Mum's doctors and your routine checkups? Everything's excellent, I replied for Robert. We can travel safely. Sophia smiled, but her eyes remained cold. Do you need help planning that trip? I can look up hotels, packages. It won't be necessary, I cut in. We've already taken care of everything. The dinner proceeded with that underlying tension. In every seemingly innocent question, I recognized the true intent behind it. They were evaluating our mental state, trying to establish control, looking for ways to physically get closer to us. When I served dessert, a flan that I had carefully made in front of Robert, Andrew brought the subject back up. I was talking to a lawyer, he said casually, about broader power of attorney. You know how it is for emergencies? What kind of emergencies? Robert asked, his voice controlled. Well, if one of you needs to be hospitalized, or if, things get worse with Mum's memory, the lawyer suggested full power of attorney, which would give me authority to make medical and financial decisions for you. I looked at my son, studying his face. That same face I kissed as a baby, comforted as a child, proudly photographed at his graduation. How had it transformed into the mask of a calculating stranger? It won't be necessary, son, I finally said. We already updated all our documents recently. We even made some changes to our will and the insurance beneficiaries. Andrew's expression froze for an instant. Changes? What kind of changes? Nothing out of the ordinary, just making sure everything is in order, in case anything happens to us. Sophia placed her hand on Andrew's arm as if to restrain him. It's always good to review those documents, she said softly. Did you consult a lawyer? Dr. Morrison, the one you recommended, Robert lied with impressive naturalness. He was very helpful. There was no Dr. Morrison, but the lie achieved its goal. Both seemed momentarily destabilized. At 10 o'clock, Andrew looked at his watch and announced they had to leave. I have to work early tomorrow, he justified. But I knew the real reason. They needed to recalculate their plans. After many fake hugs and empty promises to visit more often, they finally left. As soon as the door closed, Robert and I collapsed onto the sofa, physically exhausted from the effort of keeping up appearances. They're getting suspicious, Robert whispered. Did they realize something changed? I agreed, getting up to retrieve the recorder. We rewound the recording, listening to the entire conversation again. The implications were clear. Andrew and Sophia were still determined to go ahead with the plan, but our recent moves, the doctor's visit, the bank changes, the mention of the will, had made them cautious. They're going to try something soon, Robert said. They can't wait much longer, now that we've started taking protective measures. We need more concrete evidence, I said. The recording helps, but it's still not enough for the police. What if we tried to get them to confess? Confront them directly? I shook my head. Too risky. They would deny everything and become more vigilant. That night, we checked all the locks 3 times before going to bed. Even so, I slept with a phone next to the bed and a chair propped against the bedroom door. Precautions I never imagined needing to take against my own son. The next morning, I woke up startled by the sound of a car parking. I rushed to the window and saw Sophia getting out of her black SUV. Alone. At 8 o'clock in the morning on a workday, when she should have been at work. "Robert," I called urgently. "Sophia is here." He got up quickly, still sleepy. "Alone? Where's Andrew?" "I don't know. I'm going to open the door, but stay close." I went downstairs, trying to control my breathing. Why would Sophia come so early, unannounced? What did she want? I opened the door even before she rang the bell. Her face registered surprise for a moment, quickly replaced by a practiced smile. "Mary, sorry to come so early. I was passing by on my way to work and thought I'd drop off these documents Andrew put together for you." She held a yellow folder. "What documents?" I asked, not attempting to take it. "About that power of attorney we talked about yesterday, and some articles about treatments for early Alzheimer's that can help slow the disease's progress." She extended the folder again. "Andrew is really worried about you." I looked at the folder for a long moment. It was a trap. It had to be. Maybe documents already prepared with my forged signature, like the life insurance we discovered. "Why don't you come in?" I invited, keeping my tone casual. "We can have a coffee and review them together." Sophia visibly hesitated. "Actually, I'm late for work. I just wanted to leave this for you to read calmly." "I insist," I said, opening the door wider. "Robert just made fresh coffee. It'll only take 5 minutes." Reluctantly, she came in. I led her to the kitchen, where Robert was already there, feigning calm while drinking his coffee. "Sophia, what a nice surprise," he said. "She brought some documents for us to sign," I explained, emphasizing the word sign. Robert understood immediately. "That's great," he replied. "Let's take a look." Sophia seemed increasingly uncomfortable as Robert took the folder and began examining the documents. I watched her intently, noticing how her eyes followed his every move, how her fingers nervously drummed on the table. "Interesting," Robert murmured after a few minutes. "This power of attorney would give Andrew total control over our finances and medical decisions. It would practically make us legally incapacitated." "It's just a precaution," Sophia quickly justified. "Considering Mary's condition." "What condition would that be exactly?" I asked directly. "Well, the memory lapses, the confusion." She hesitated, apparently realizing she was on dangerous ground. Andrew noticed several episodes. "Curious," I commented. "Dr. Paul didn't find any of that yesterday." "Doctors can be wrong," she retorted, regaining her composure. "That's why a second opinion with a specialist is important." Robert put the documents back in the folder and pushed it towards Sophia. "We appreciate the concern, but we won't be signing this. In fact, we've already started the procedures to revoke the limited power of attorney we gave Andrew last year." The shock on her face was genuine and momentary, quickly replaced by a studied expression of concern. "But why? Andrew only wants to help." "We're sure he does," I replied, "but we prefer to maintain control of our own lives." Sophia stood up abruptly. "I have to go. I'm really running late." "Of course," I said, accompanying her to the door. "Tell Andrew we'll call later to talk about these documents." As soon as she left, Robert and I looked at each other, the same conclusion evident to both of us. "They're accelerating the plan," he whispered. "Yes," I nodded. "And that means we have to act now." After Sophia left, Robert and I carefully examined the documents she had brought. As we suspected, the power of attorney would grant Andrew absolute power over our finances, property, and medical decisions. There was also a voluntary admission form for a retirement home. In reality, an institution for elderly adults with severe dementia, with spaces for our signatures. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore," Robert murmured, his fingers trembling as he flipped through the papers. "They're practically asking us to sign our own death warrant." "That's good," I replied, surprising him. "The more explicit they are, the more evidence we'll have." I spent the morning photographing every document, creating digital copies that I sent to the email of Stella, my longtime friend and the only person outside our house I completely trusted. I briefly explained the situation and asked her to keep the files safe without talking to anyone about it. "What do we do now?" Robert asked when I finished. "We need a plan. They are clearly moving forward. Sophia's surprise visit. These documents. We can't wait any longer." We decided it was time to seek professional help. Not the police. We still didn't have enough definitive evidence, but a lawyer who could guide us on how to legally protect our assets and, more importantly, our lives. We chose a lawyer we hadn't known before and who had no connection to Andrew, Dr. Lauren Miller, a specialist in family and criminal law. We managed to schedule a consultation for that same afternoon. In the elegant office downtown, we explained the entire situation to Dr. Lauren, the discovered messages, the bank accounts, the fraudulent life insurance, the manipulated medical records, the documents Sophia had brought that morning. The lawyer listened intently, taking occasional notes and asking for specific details. When we finished, she took a deep breath before speaking. "Sir and Madam, we are facing an extremely serious situation. What you have described constitutes several crimes: conspiracy, forgery of documents, attempted fraud, and most seriously, conspiracy to commit murder." "Do we have enough evidence for the police?" Robert asked. "The messages are the most damning evidence, but because you obtained them by accessing Sophia's phone without her authorization, there is a risk they could be considered illegal evidence. However, considering the seriousness of the situation and the imminent danger to you, I believe we can build a strong case." "What should we do first?" I asked. "Immediately, we will prepare legal documents, revoking any existing power of attorney and blocking the possibility of new ones without the presence of an independent attorney. I myself can serve as a witness to your mental capacity. Then, we will file a detailed complaint, presenting all the evidence we have so far." We spent the next 2 hours signing documents, formalizing statements, and planning every step. Dr. Lauren was thorough, ensuring every legal aspect was covered. "Now," she finally said, "we move to the most urgent matter, your physical safety. I strongly suggest you do not go back home today." Robert and I exchanged alarmed glances. "Do you think we're in immediate danger?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Based on what you've told me, yes. They've realized you are taking protective measures. Sophia's surprise visit this morning suggests urgency on their part. If I were you, I'd spend a few days in a hotel using a different name until we can obtain a protective order." We left the lawyer's office with a folder full of documents and a sense of urgency. We went directly to the police precinct, where we filed a detailed complaint. The shift commander, a middle-aged man named Chief Davis, listened to our story with growing concern. "This is extremely serious," he commented after examining the evidence. "I'm going to assign an investigator to the case immediately and request discreet surveillance of your residence." When we mentioned that the lawyer had suggested not going home, the chief emphatically agreed. "In fact, it would be safer for you to stay elsewhere for now. But first, I'd like to send a team to install discreet cameras in your house, with your consent, of course. If they try to enter or do anything, we'll have concrete proof." We agreed to the plan. We would briefly return home, just to collect a few essential belongings, while the police installed surveillance equipment in strategic locations. Then, we would go to a hotel downtown, far from our neighborhood, using aliases as suggested. During the ride back, Robert remained silent, looking out the taxi window. When we were almost there, he finally spoke. I never imagined the day would come when I'd be afraid of my own son. I squeezed his hand. There were no words that could ease that pain. Our house, viewed from the outside, looked strangely normal. The same windows, the same garden we had tended for years, the same mailbox Andrew had painted as a teenager. It was hard to believe that this place that represented safety and family had become the stage for a conspiracy against our lives. The plainclothes officers arrived discreetly in an unmarked car. They entered through the back door and worked quickly, installing small cameras in strategic places: the living room, kitchen, hallways, entrances. They explained that the images would be transmitted directly to the precinct and monitored 24 hours a day. Meanwhile, Robert and I collected the essentials: clothes for a few days, medications, important documents. I avoided looking at the family photographs on the wall, the objects that told the story of our life together. Every memory was now tainted by betrayal. "We're ready," announced the officer in charge of the installation. "The cameras are virtually invisible to the naked eye, but they capture everything in high definition. If someone enters, we'll know." He handed us a small card with a phone number. "This is a direct line to our team. Any emergency, call immediately." As we were about to leave, my phone rang. It was Andrew. I looked at the officer, who nodded, indicating I should answer normally. "Hello?" I replied, trying to sound natural. "Mum, where are you guys? I stopped by your house and no one answered." My heart raced. He had gone to our house while we were out. "Why?" "We're shopping at the mall," I lied. "We needed a few things." "Oh, I see." I was worried. "You never go out without letting us know." The falseness in his voice made me sick. "It was a last-minute decision. We're heading back home now." "Perfect. Because I have a surprise for you. I'm waiting for you here." I froze. He was in our house right now. "A surprise?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Yes, I brought that wine you like. I thought we could spend the afternoon together, talking about those documents Sophia left this morning." The officer signaled for me to keep the conversation going. "How thoughtful, son. We'll be there in half an hour, more or less." "Perfect. I'll wait for you." When I hung up, the officer was already communicating with his colleagues. "Suspect on site. Repeat, suspect on site. Maintain distance, but be prepared." Turning to us, he explained, "We're going to let him in. We'll observe what he does. If he tries to plant anything, drugs, poison, anything, we'll have it on video. That would be undeniable proof." The plan made sense, but the idea of Andrew wandering through our house, possibly setting a trap, terrified me. "What if he discovers the cameras?" Robert asked. "Highly unlikely. They are button-sized and placed in strategic spots. Besides, we have agents discreetly positioned on the block." We went to a nearby coffee shop, where we anxiously awaited news. With every minute that passed, I imagined what Andrew might be doing in our house. Setting a trap? Planting evidence against us? Rummaging through our belongings looking for something? After 40 minutes that felt like an eternity, the officer received a call. He listened intently, nodding affirmatively. "He left," he reported after hanging up, "and we have something interesting on the recordings." We quickly returned to the precinct, where we were taken to a room with several monitors. Chief Davis was already there, watching the footage from the cameras installed in our house. "Mr. and Mrs. Smith," he greeted us solemnly, "I think you should see this." On the screen, we saw Andrew entering the kitchen with 2 plastic bags. He looked around, checked that he was alone, and then began to act methodically. He took several bottles of medication out of the bags and placed them in our medicine cabinet, mixing them with our own. Then he opened a bottle of wine, likely the surprise he mentioned had, and added some kind of white powder, stirring carefully before putting the cork back in. Finally, he took a small electronic device we didn't recognize from his pocket and discreetly installed it under the kitchen table, likely a microphone or camera. "Oh my God," I murmured, my hands covering my mouth, seeing my own son, on video, deliberately preparing what looked like our murder, was an indescribable pain. "We now have more than enough evidence," the chief said. "I'm issuing arrest warrants for Andrew Smith and Sophia Smith immediately." "What? What did he put in our medicine cabinet?" Robert asked, his voice trembling. "We need to analyze it, but judging by the appearance, they are controlled medications, possibly in high doses. The substance he added to the wine will also be analyzed, but I would bet on some kind of powerful sedative." The chief placed his hand on my shoulder. "Mrs. Smith, I know this is extremely painful, but I need you to understand. Your son was actively trying to kill you today. If you had gone back home and drunk that wine—" I couldn't hold back the tears. The reality of the situation finally hit me with full force. It wasn't just text messages or suspicious documents. It was my son, in our kitchen, deliberately poisoning drinks and medications he knew we would use. "What happens now?" Robert asked, holding me as I wept. "We're arresting them today," the chief replied. "With this evidence, there's no chance of bail. You are safe now, but I still recommend you stay in the hotel for a few days, until we sort everything out." As we left the precinct, trying to process everything that had happened, a police officer approached us quickly. "Chief Davis, we just got a call. Andrew and Sophia Smith are at the Smiths' house right now. They seem agitated. They're looking for them." The chief reacted immediately. "Tactical team ready, let's go now." Turning to us, he explained. "They probably realized something is wrong, that you didn't go back home as promised. We're arresting them right now." "Can we go with you?" I asked, surprising myself. Part of me wanted to run, never see Andrew or Sophia again, but another part, perhaps the stronger part, needed to be there, to witness the end of that nightmare. The chief hesitated, but eventually agreed. "You can stay in the police car at a safe distance, but you will not interfere in any way." On the way to our house, my heart pounding uncontrollably in my chest, I wondered how I had reached that point. How my son, whom I held in my arms as a baby, had transformed into this stranger capable of coldly planning my murder. When we arrived, several police cars were already positioned discreetly around our house. Over the radio, we heard that Andrew and Sophia were still inside, apparently arguing about what to do. "They've figured out something is wrong," a police officer commented. "They are trying to call the Smiths' cell phones repeatedly." Indeed, my phone had rung several times in the last few minutes. Always Andrew. I ignored every call, following the police's instructions. Chief Davis personally coordinated the operation, speaking softly into the radio with the various agents positioned. "Teams in position," he finally announced. "We're going in a minute." It was then that we saw movement. The front door opened, and Andrew rushed out, followed by Sophia. Both were carrying backpacks and seemed agitated, looking nervously around as they headed toward the car parked at the curb. "They're trying to escape," Robert murmured. In an instant, several police officers emerged from their hiding places, surrounding the couple with weapons drawn. "Police! Stop! Hands where we can see them!" I saw the shock on Andrew's face, the panic in Sophia's eyes. For a moment, Andrew seemed to consider running, but quickly realized he was surrounded. Slowly, both raised their hands. In a matter of seconds, they were subdued, handcuffed, and placed in separate vehicles. It all happened so fast and so organized that it felt unreal, like a movie scene. Chief Davis approached our car. It's done. Both are in custody, charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and various other crimes. We found the tampered wine and the medications he planted. We're going to analyze everything. I looked through the window of the police car and saw my son being driven away, handcuffed, in the back seat of a patrol car. Our eyes met for a brief moment. I saw no remorse in his eyes, just anger and perhaps surprise at having been caught. In that moment, a strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't relief. It wasn't satisfied vengeance. It was just a profound emptiness, as if something fundamental had been ripped out of me. We returned to the precinct, where we gave more formal statements. The police had found several incriminating items in Andrew and Sophia's backpacks. The original medications from the bottles he had planted in our house, more doses of the powder he put in the wine, plane tickets abroad dated for the next day, and a considerable amount of cash. They were ready to run, the chief explained. They probably realized something was wrong, that you didn't return home as promised. The plan was clearly to leave the poisoned wine, wait for you to consume it, and flee before the bodies were found. Robert held my hand tightly as we listened. Every new detail was like a knife twisting in my heart. You can see them if you wish, the chief offered after finalizing the bureaucratic procedures. They are in separate cells, awaiting transfer. Robert shook his head. He wasn't ready yet, and I respected that. But something inside me needed to look into my son's eyes one last time. I want to see Andrew, I said, surprising everyone, even myself. The chief led me down a long, cold corridor to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. We'll bring him in here. We'll be watching through the glass. And if you feel any discomfort, just raise your hand, and we'll interrupt immediately. I nodded, sitting up straight with my hands clasped on the table to hide their trembling. A few minutes later, the door opened and Andrew entered, handcuffed and escorted by an officer. His face was pale, his eyes red, his hair disheveled. He looked like he had aged 10 years in a few hours. The officer made him sit across from me and stepped out, remaining just outside the door. For almost a minute, we remained in silence, just looking at each other. Andrew was the first to speak. "You set a trap for me," he said, his voice low and bitter. "This whole thing is a huge misunderstanding." "Don't lie to me," I replied calmly. "Not now. It's over, Andrew." He looked away, his jaw tense. "What do you want me to say?" "I want to know why. Why your own father and me? What did we do to deserve this?" Andrew let out a humorless laugh. "You wouldn't understand. Try to explain it to me. I have all the time in the world now." He looked me straight in the eye again, something cold and calculating in his gaze that I had never noticed before. "Money, Mom. It was always about money. You have so much. The house, the pensions, the investments, the insurance. And what do you do with it all? Nothing. Living your mediocre little lives, saving every penny as if you were going to live forever." I felt the blow of his words, but I kept my composure. "And that justifies killing us." "It was Sophia's idea at first," he admitted, as if that absolved him somehow. "She works in finance. She realized how much you were worth, and she was tired of waiting. Why wait decades for an inheritance, she said, when we can start our real life now?" "And you agreed? Just like that? So easily?" He shrugged. "It wasn't right away, but she convinced me it would be better for everyone. You were already old. You'd eventually start having health problems. You'd suffer. It would be a favor, actually." The coldness with which he spoke chilled my blood. This wasn't the son I knew, or thought I knew. "A favor," I repeated slowly. Poisoning your own parents would be a favor. It wouldn't be painful, he replied, as if that mattered. You would simply go to sleep and not wake up, no suffering, like the wine you prepared today. Andrew fell silent for a moment. How did you find out? It was the messages on Sophia's phone, wasn't it? That idiot technician. Yes, it was the messages. But even without them, we would have realized eventually. You weren't as smart as you thought, son. He shifted in his chair, the handcuffs jingling. And now what? Are you going to testify against your own son? Send me to prison? You were going to make it look like an accident. No one would suffer. You'd die peacefully, and I would finally have the life I deserve. The life you deserve, I repeated, letting the words hang in the air between us. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to see past the anger, past the coldness, searching for any vestige of the child we raised. I found nothing. I don't recognize you, I finally said, my voice barely a whisper. The son we raised, whom we loved, whom we protected. Where is he? I'm here, Andrew replied, a flash of emotion crossing his face. It's me. I just grew up. I just got tired of waiting my turn. I stood up slowly. You'll have a good lawyer. We'll pay for it. It's the last act as your parents. But don't expect anything else from us, Andrew. What you did is irreversible. Mom, he called as I reached the door. You don't understand. I just wanted a chance to really live. I turned around one last time. We gave you every chance, son. Education, love, support. The choice of how to live was yours. And you chose this. I walked out of the room feeling as if every step required enormous effort. In the hallway, I found Robert waiting, his eyes red, his face marked by tears he wasn't even trying to hide. What did he say? He asked softly. The truth. Finally, I replied. He did everything for money. Our death would just be a means for him to have the life he deserves. Robert closed his eyes, a deep sorrow contorting his face. How did we not notice? How did we not see what he became? I had no answer. The same question tormented me. How could parents who were present for every important moment, who celebrated every achievement, who taught values and principles, raise someone capable of coldly planning the murder of their own parents? We left the precinct in silence, heading to the hotel where we would spend the next few nights. On the way, Robert spoke little, absorbed in his own thoughts. I knew he was reliving every moment of Andrew's childhood, looking for the exact point where something went wrong. At the hotel, a simple but comfortable place downtown, we requested a room with 2 single beds. Neither of us mentioned it, but we both knew we needed our own space that night. The pain was too personal, too profound to be shared, even after so many years together. I lay down, exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. Images of Andrew as a child mixed with the vision of him putting poison in the wine, creating a waking nightmare I couldn't escape. When I finally fell asleep, it was a restless slumber, filled with confusing dreams, where I ran down endless corridors, chased by shadows with my son's face. I woke up startled by the sound of the phone. It was Chief Davis. Mrs. Smith, sorry to call so early. We need you to come to the precinct as soon as possible. There's been a development in the case. The grave tone in his voice alarmed me. Did something happen? I prefer to explain it in person. It's best if you come right away. I woke Robert and told him about the call. In 30 minutes, we were at the precinct, being led directly to the chief's office. Davis greeted us with a somber expression. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I appreciate you coming so quickly. I have news, complicated news. What happened? Robert asked, his voice strained. Sophia Smith requested to make a full statement in exchange for a plea deal. She's willing to testify against your son. I felt a knot in my throat. What did she say? According to her, the original plan was just to steal from you, divert money from the accounts, get power of attorney to control the assets. The idea of physically eliminating you only came up in the last few months, when Andrew realized you might discover the diversions. Robert squeezed my hand tightly. She also claims, the chief continued, that Andrew was also planning to kill her after you were dead, and he had access to all the money. The revelation dropped like a bomb. My son was planning to kill his own wife? I whispered. According to her, yes. She found messages from him with another woman, discussing how they would split the money after the Sophia problem was solved. I closed my eyes, trying to absorb this new layer of horror. It wasn't enough to plan our deaths. Andrew was willing to eliminate anyone who stood between him and the money. There's more, Davis said, his tone even graver. We analysed the powder he put in the wine. It's a mix of powerful sedatives and a substance called oleander, which is extremely toxic, causing cardiac arrest. And we found evidence that he had tried before. How is that? Robert asked. Samples of your hair, Mrs. Smith, revealed traces of the same substance, likely administered in small doses to simulate natural health problems. That would explain the memory lapses he alleged you were having. They weren't lapses. They were symptoms of gradual poisoning. The room seemed to spin around me. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself as the cruel reality hit me. My son had already started poisoning me, slowly, methodically. For how long? I managed to ask. It's hard to say precisely, but based on the samples, at least 3 months. 3 months? I mentally reviewed the small signs I had ignored: more frequent headaches, moments of dizziness, sleepless nights. I attributed it all to stress, to age, never imagining I was being slowly poisoned by my own son. And Mr. Robert? The chief asked, turning to my husband. I feel fine, he replied, confused. Even so, we recommend toxicological exams. If Mrs. Smith was targeted, it's possible he also started acting against you. We left the precinct even more shaken than before. The idea that Andrew wasn't just planning to kill us, but had already started the process, was unbearable. Every meal we shared in the last few months, every cup of coffee he kindly made, every medication he reminded me to take, it could all have been part of his macabre plan. We're going to the hospital right now, Robert insisted. We need to check for permanent damage. At the hospital, we were attended to immediately after explaining the situation. Doctors ran a battery of tests, collected blood and hair samples, and admitted us for 24 hours of observation. The results, when they came, confirmed the suspicions. I had detectable levels of oleander in my system, though not enough to cause permanent damage. Robert was clean, suggesting Andrew had focused on me first, probably because, as an older woman with a history of health issues, I had breast cancer years ago, my death would seem less suspicious. You were lucky, ma'am, the doctor explained. The gradual poisoning was interrupted before it caused irreversible damage. With proper treatment and time, your body will completely eliminate the toxin. Lucky was a strange word to describe the situation. I was lucky because I found out my son was poisoning me before he succeeded in killing me. In the following days, the case grew to proportions we never imagined. The story of the son who planned to murder his parents for inheritance attracted national media attention. Reporters surrounded the hotel where we were staying. They called constantly. They tried every way to get a statement from us. We refused all interviews, all appearances. Our pain was too deep, too personal to be turned into a public spectacle. Dr. Lauren, our lawyer, became our official spokesperson, managing all legal aspects and keeping the press at bay. It was she who brought us the news that Andrew would be charged with attempted aggravated murder, with the aggravating factors of premeditated poisoning and base motive. If convicted, he would face decades in prison. A week after Andrew and Sophia's arrest, we finally felt safe enough to return home. The police had removed all the surveillance equipment, but installed an alarm system connected directly to the precinct, just as a precaution, as Chief Davis put it. Stepping back into that house was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Every room held memories, some beautiful, others now contaminated by the knowledge of what Andrew had become. In the living room, the family photographs seemed to mock us. Andrew as a child smiling on his first day of school, Andrew as a proud teenager with his swimming trophy, Andrew as an adult on his wedding day with Sophia. Moments that captured a life we now knew had been, at least in part, an illusion. Robert walked slowly through the house, touching objects, looking at photographs, as if trying to reconcile the happy past with the devastating present. "We need to move," he finally said. "I can't live here knowing what happened in this kitchen, in this house." I silently agreed. The house that had been our refuge for decades was now permeated with betrayal and danger. That night, lying in our bed, hand in hand in the darkness, Robert voiced the thought that was tormenting me. Will we ever understand what happened? How our son transformed into this? "I don't know," I replied honestly. "Maybe some things have no explanation. Maybe some people just choose the wrong path, regardless of how they were raised." We talked to him, Mary, so many times, about honesty, about hard work, about family. How was it not enough? Maybe for some people, nothing is enough. Maybe the emptiness inside them can never be filled. We remained silent for a long time, each absorbed in our own thoughts. Finally, Robert spoke again. "What do we do now? How do we move on after this?" It was the question I had been asking myself. How do you rebuild a life when the very foundations were destroyed? How do you trust again when the betrayal came from the one we loved the most? "One day at a time," I replied, squeezing his hand. "We start over, somewhere else, supporting each other." In the following weeks, we put the house up for sale, started the process of looking for a new home, and tried somehow to rebuild a sense of normalcy. We found a small apartment downtown, completely different from the spacious house where we raised Andrew, and slowly began to transfer only the items that didn't carry painful memories. Meanwhile, the court case was progressing. Sophia reached a plea agreement with the prosecution, agreeing to testify against Andrew in exchange for a reduced sentence. Andrew, on the other hand, stood firm in denying the most serious accusations, claiming that the whole thing was nothing more than a family misunderstanding and that the evidence had been manipulated. 2 months after his arrest, we received a letter from him from prison. Robert wanted to burn it unread, but something in me needed to know what he had to say. The letter was short, written in the familiar handwriting I would recognize anywhere. "Mom and Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this. Everything I did was out of love. Yes, I wanted the money, I wanted the freedom, but I also wanted to spare you the suffering of growing old, of becoming dependent, of losing your dignity. I don't expect forgiveness. I know what I did is unforgivable in your eyes, but I want you to know it wasn't out of hatred. It was out of ambition. Yes, greed, perhaps, but also a distorted form of love. One day when you're ready, I'd like to see you again. Until then, know that, despite everything, I'm still your son, Andrew." I read the letter 3 times. trying to find sincerity in the words, some vestige of the son I knew, but all I saw was more manipulation, more attempts to justify the unjustifiable. Out of love, I murmured, folding the letter. He tried to kill us out of love. Robert, who finally decided to read it too, sadly shook his head. He still doesn't understand. Maybe he never will. I put the letter in a drawer and never replied. Maybe one day when the pain wasn't so sharp, when I could think of Andrew without feeling that devastating mix of love and betrayal, I would find the words to respond. But not now, not while the wound was still bleeding. The following months passed in a blur of legal procedures, sessions with psychologists, and the arduous task of rebuilding our lives. We sold the house for less than market value. We wanted to get rid of it as soon as possible, and settled into the apartment downtown. It was smaller, simpler, but it didn't carry the weight of painful memories. Andrew's trial was scheduled to begin in 3 months. The prosecution had a strong case with abundant evidence: the text messages, the videos from the house, the toxicological exams confirming gradual poisoning, Sophia's testimony, the forged documents. Conviction seemed certain. Even so, the idea of testifying against my own son terrified me. How would I sit in that courtroom and tell the world how he had methodically planned our deaths? How would I look him in the eye as I sealed his fate? Robert and I discussed this extensively with our therapist, Dr. Martha Key, whom we started seeing weekly after the whole tragedy. "You are not responsible for his choices," she constantly reminded us. "Testifying is not a betrayal, it's simply telling the truth." "But he's our son," Robert argued. "Despite everything, he's still our son." "Yes, he is your son, and he is also an adult man who made terrible decisions. Both realities can coexist." One afternoon, while organizing some boxes we still hadn't unpacked in the new apartment, I found an old photo album. I sat on the floor and slowly began flipping through it. They were photos of Andrew as a baby, then as a child, as a teenager, always smiling, always surrounded by our love. In one specific photo, he was about 5 years old, proudly holding up a drawing he had made. 3 stick figures representing our family, with a smiling sun above. "To the best mum in the world," the drawing read in crooked, childish letters. The tears came uncontrollably. Where was that child now? At what point did that loving creature transform into someone capable of planning the death of his own parents? Robert found me like that, crying over the open album. Without a word, he sat down next to me and hugged me. We stayed there, both crying, for the loss of the son we loved. Not for his physical death, but for the death of what we believed he was. The following week, we received an unexpected visit. Stella, my friend from the library who had helped me document the evidence against Andrew, brought with her a folder of old newspaper clippings. "Mary, Robert," she began excitedly, "I found something you need to see." The clippings were from a small newspaper in a town in the south, dated 5 years earlier. The headlines screamed, "Elderly man dies in mysterious circumstances. Niece inherits fortune after uncle's death. Police investigate suspicious death, but close case due to lack of evidence." "What is this?" I asked, confused. "Look at the photo." Stella pointed to the image of a young woman being interviewed. It was Sophia, a few years younger, but unmistakably her. Before she was Sophia Miller and moved to Denver, she was known as Caroline James in this little town. And the man who died mysteriously was her uncle, who raised her after her parents died. Robert took the clippings, reading quickly. She inherited everything. The police suspected poisoning, but couldn't get conclusive evidence. "Exactly," Stella confirmed. "And do you know what the suspected substance was?" Oleander, I replied, a chill running down my spine. Stella nodded gravely. The same poison they found in your system, Mary. The same one Andrew put in the wine. The implication was clear and devastating. Sophia wasn't just Andrew's accomplice. She was probably the mastermind, the person who brought the idea, who taught the technique, who had done this before. "Why are you showing us this now?" Robert asked. "Because her plea deal with the prosecution is almost finalized," Stella explained. "She's going to spend just a few years in prison in exchange for her testimony against Andrew. It's not fair. Not when she's probably killed before." We took the discovery to Dr. Lauren Miller, our lawyer, who immediately contacted the case prosecutor. The investigations were reopened, both regarding the death of Sophia's uncle and any possible similar cases in her past. In a matter of weeks, Sophia's plea deal was on hold, and she faced additional charges. The police found a diary in her apartment detailing not only the plan to kill us, but also notes about her uncle's death and plans to eliminate Andrew after gaining access to our money. The picture that emerged was even darker than we imagined. Sophia was a calculating sociopath who had deceived Andrew, manipulating him into planning our deaths. She had used him as a tool, intending to dispose of him as soon as she got what she wanted. Andrew, upon learning this during a preliminary hearing, collapsed. According to his lawyer, he finally realized the extent of the manipulation he had suffered, although this did not exempt him from his guilt for actively participating in the plan. It was at that moment that we made a difficult decision. We would visit Andrew in prison, not for forgiveness or reconciliation. It was too soon for that, if it would ever be possible. But to face the truth, to try to understand. The penitentiary was a cold, oppressive place. We followed a guard down grey corridors to a small visiting room, where we waited in tense silence. When the door opened and Andrew entered, handcuffed and wearing the orange prison jumpsuit, my heart sank. He had lost weight. His face was pale, his eyes red, his hair dishevelled. He looked much older than his 35 years. When he saw us enter, immediate tears began to stream down his face. "Mum? Dad?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "We came," Robert simply replied, sitting down next to the bed. There wasn't much to say. The abyss between us was too vast to be filled with words. But being there, offering that small human comfort, seemed important, not just for Andrew, but for us too. "I'm so sorry," he finally said, "for everything. I know it means nothing after what I did, but I have to say it." "Why did you try to commit suicide?" I asked directly. He looked at his own bandaged hands. "Because I finally understood the magnitude of what I did. Not just the plan, the lies, the manipulation, but how much I hurt you, how much I destroyed. And I realized I could never fix it." For the first time since it all happened, I saw something in his eyes that seemed genuine. Not manipulation, not self-pity, but real comprehension of the pain he had caused. "You're right," Robert said, his voice gentle but firm. "Some things can't be fixed, but that doesn't mean you should give up." "Why? What do I have left?" "Life," I simply replied. "Imperfect, difficult, inside these walls for many years, but still, life. The opportunity to, perhaps one day, do something good with it." We stayed for only half an hour. We didn't promise to return regularly, nor did we offer easy forgiveness. We just said goodbye, leaving in the air the possibility, however faint, of some kind of future relationship. On the way back home, Robert and I remained silent for a long time, processing the visit, the conflicting emotions it stirred. "Was it the right thing to do?" he finally asked. I don't know if there's a right thing in situations like this, I replied. I just know I don't regret going. 4 years after discovering the conspiracy against our lives, Robert and I celebrated 45 years of marriage. We decided not to do anything grand, just a quiet dinner at home, with the few friends who stood by us throughout the storm. During dinner, as I watched Robert tell a story that made everyone laugh, I realized something important. We were happy again, not in the same way as before. There were scars that would never completely disappear, but in a deeper, more conscious way. We had faced the worst life could offer and survived. We had rebuilt something from the chaos, found meaning after the destruction. And perhaps most importantly, we had chosen not to allow the betrayal to poison the rest of our lives. Andrew remained in prison, where he would spend many more years. After the suicide attempt, he seemed to have found some sense of purpose. He started studying law through a program for prisoners, with the idea of eventually helping other inmates. We visited him occasionally, not frequently, but enough to maintain a tenuous connection. Sophia was serving her sentence in a maximum security penitentiary, refusing any contact with us. From what we heard, she continued to deny responsibility for all her crimes, always blaming others. As for us, we learned to carry our story without letting it completely define us. When we met new people, the truth would eventually come out. Our city wasn't that big, and the case had been notorious, but we found that most people were compassionate, respectful of our pain. Some nights, I still wake up startled, remembering that moment in the electronics shop when Jess turned the phone screen toward me and my world collapsed. Sometimes, Robert still has nightmares, where Andrew manages to complete his plan. But those shadows of the past appear less frequently now, overcome by the light of the present, the small joys of everyday life, new friends, rediscovered hobbies, the love that survived the unthinkable. On the night of our 45th anniversary, after all the guests had left, Robert and I sat on the balcony of our apartment, looking up at the starry sky. "Who would have thought," he commented, holding my hand, "that after everything, we would still be here, together?" "Survivors," I smiled, squeezing his hand. "More than that," Robert corrected. "Thrivers." And he was right. We weren't just surviving. We were living fully, consciously, gratefully. We had learned the hard way that life is fragile, that the most intimate relationships can hide terrible secrets, that betrayal can come from where you least expect it. But we also learned that human strength is extraordinary, that it is possible to start over, even after the worst devastation, that love, true love, not the distorted version Andrew claimed to feel, can survive even the worst storms. 5 years after that fateful afternoon at the electronics shop, I look back and see not just the tragedy, but also the growth that came afterward. I didn't choose this path. I didn't ask for this pain, but I accepted the challenge of rebuilding, of finding meaning, of continuing to love despite everything. And perhaps that is the greatest victory, choosing not to let hatred, bitterness, or fear define the rest of my life. Choosing every day compassion, courage, and hope, even knowing how dark the world can be. Jess unknowingly gave me more than the opportunity to physically survive that afternoon. He gave me the opportunity to discover a strength I didn't know I had. The strength not just to unravel a conspiracy, but to rebuild a life from scratch, to love again, to trust despite the scars. And for that, I will be eternally grateful. Now, if you enjoyed this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments what part left you speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a member for access to exclusive videos that I don't post here. I'll see you there.